someone who may be more leaning towards the serial type of killer. I know through my sources they are working very hard now to make a determination as to whether or not Bryan Kohberger is responsible for other unsolved or cold case murders. So it is very common with respect to someone who has this type of fetish with respect to stalking these type of individuals and then carrying out these heinous acts.
This is Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies.
Hello, Reporter Room investigators. I am so glad you decided to join me today on Reporter Room. We have so much new information to get into. Let's get started. We're going to be discussing revelations reportedly from Steve Gonsalves, who is Kaylee's dad, regarding the Dickies monkey suit receipt. Bethany and Dylan were text messaging each other when this all went down on November 13th, and the latest court ruling by Judge John Judge. As we discussed in prior videos, Steve and Christy Gonsalves hired their own private investigator to look into this case. Now, according to an airmail article, Kaylee's parents' investigation into who did away with Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana, the article claims that Steve cultivated two grand jury members and asked them to provide him with information. The problem with this is that Howard Blum never interviewed Steve Gonsalves, as evidenced by Steve Gonsalves' own statement. So, if you're not familiar, Howard Blum has been doing a multi-part series on the Idaho 4 case and Bryan Kohberger. In his most recent podcast, he repeatedly used Steve Gonsalves as his source. However, Steve Gonsalves has denounced a lot of what Howard Blum says in his publication, saying Blum is profiting from his dead daughter and his family's grief. And he said, quote, "I just want to make it clear to the public that we have not spoken to Mr. Blum about the death of our daughter. This is nothing more than grandstanding and a very, very poor attempt at getting attention. This piece is obviously fictional, but written in poor taste. The Gonsalves family would ask that everyone please respect the victims of this tragedy and continue to support trustworthy journalism." Wow, you guys, I don't even know what to say. Howard Blum responded, but it was, tell me what you think about this. He said, "One, I have no wish to get into a public argument with Mr. Gonsalves. He and his family have already suffered too much pain. Two, we can both agree that I never interviewed them, as the article clearly states. Three, my portrait of a grieving father was based on a trove of texts he wrote that were made available to airmail, his public statements, and interviews with people close to him." Well, this is my response to you, Howard Blum. A trove of texts that were made available to you by who? In my opinion, Howard Blum, who is a journalist. Let's take this step by step. First, Howard Blum says, "I have no wish to get into a public argument with Mr. Gonsalves. He and his family have already suffered too much pain." This is so disingenuous because Howard Blum, in my opinion, is profiting off of the pain of the Gonsalves family. And he is pushing forward a fake narrative. He never interviewed Steve Gonsalves. And in my opinion, he did imply that he had. It was not clear that he had not interviewed Steve Gonsalves. Two, he says, "We can both agree on that I never interviewed him, as the article clearly states." I didn't think it was clear. I listened to the podcast. I didn't think it was clear. To me, it sounded like he had interviewed Steve Gonsalves. Howard Blum says, "Three, my portrait of a grieving father was based on a trove of texts he wrote that were made available to airmail, his public statements, and interviews with people close to him." So now I have big questions about these trove of texts that were made available to airmail. Now, it's not unusual for journalists to use anonymous sources. However, in light of the fact that Steve Gonsalves has pushed back and said that he did not do an interview with Howard Blum, and Howard Blum most definitely implied that he had spoken with Steve Gonsalves. He did not make it clear, in my opinion, that he had never interviewed him. So at this point, I think we need to know where these texts came from. Howard Blum needs to explain himself. Otherwise, he is putting his own credibility as a respected journalist into question. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Some of the information is public knowledge, but some is being attributed to texts that we simply do not have access to. Now, according to these two grand jury members, BK bought a Dickies suit and law enforcement has the receipt for it. We have surmised together here on Reporter Room that is how BK would have prevented blood transfer from the 1122 King Road house into his vehicle and home. There would be no other reason for someone to purchase this Dickies suit. In my opinion, as a PhD major, this also would explain why Bethany saw, as reported by the Mirror, a man that she didn't think was wearing any clothes exiting through those second floor patio doors. Now, I'm going to talk about the two roommates and those text messages in just a moment, along with the latest court ruling, so please stay with me. So, on Reporter Room, we hypothesized that BK wore a coverall like the Dickies suit and would have stripped it all off and placed it in a trash bag on his way out. As a criminology PhD student, he would have wanted to reduce cross-contamination, and I believe he dextered out his vehicle prior to November 13th. Everything I'm sharing with you is my opinion, and opinions are not facts, so please don't send any negativity to anyone. Let's be kind and good to each other. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only, so please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and give this video a thumbs up so I know you were here. Now, law enforcement also reportedly found the receipt from the K-bar knife. We know that they were subpoenaing search history from Amazon, so was BK looking up this K-bar knife prior to purchasing it? This would show premeditation. Now, the receipt from Walmart in the defendant's possession was in fact a Dickies monkey suit, and law enforcement has not been able to find the actual monkey suit. So it would make sense that BK would have disposed of it along with that K-bar knife, in my opinion. Now, BK is innocent until proven guilty, and he hasn't had his day in court yet. I want to dig into the roommates' text messages, and then I want to go through the latest ruling by Judge John Judge. What do you guys think? Please leave me a comment in the comment section below. So, there were reportedly text messages that Bethany and Dylan sent to each other at the time of the actual murders. So there were reportedly text messages that Bethany and Dylan were sending back and forth to each other at the time that BK or someone was doing away with Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana. This was reported out by Howard Blum, this Airmail article. Can we believe anything in this Airmail article? I'm going to give you the information with the caveat that Steve Gonsalves has denied ever speaking with Howard Blum. So let's go back to that Airmail article. It says that, quote, Steve had been told that the two survivors, that would be Bethany and Dylan, allegedly had not only been awake while the killings had taken place, but they had heard everything. More astonishingly, his grand jury sources allege that the two girls had been texting one another as the murderer methodically went from one room to the next. If this is true, this is chilling, absolutely chilling. Now, these texts could have just been something mundane, like complaining to each other about the noise. And I'm sure that the defense team would have been provided these in discovery if Howard Blum's account of this is even true. I'm addressing this because this information was used as a source in multiple different videos and even on TMZ because of Howard Blum's reputation as a journalist. And so I think it's really important that you guys have all of the information and all of the facts, because you guys deserve transparency. I'm going to discuss Judge John Judge's latest ruling in just a moment. So please stay with me, but I want to stay on this text message for a second. So we don't know what the roommates were texting to each other. If this is true, they could have just been complaining about the noise upstairs to one another. They could have been afraid. It could have been something mundane, like what time do you have class tomorrow? Or it could have been something more nefarious. Now, the prosecution would have been required to turn these text messages over to the defense team during discovery. So I am confident that we're going to hear more about these text messages at the trial. What do you think? Do you think there's enough evidence to convict Bryan Kohberger? So, does this add another layer to the case if it's learned that the roommates thought something nefarious was going on but didn't call 911? What do you think? Do you think this is a problem for the prosecution, or do you think they already turned everything over to the defense team? And it really does depend on what the roommates were actually texting back and forth to each other. Judge John Judge has denied BK's defense team's request to pause the case. The judge wrote in his order, quote, as articulated on the record, the issues raised in the Kohberger's second motion to stay proceedings do not constitute a substantial failure to comply with the procedures for selecting a grand jury. The issues raised either fall outside of the purview of Idaho Code Title II, Chapter 2, Jury Selection and Service, or are typical problems seen routinely in selecting juries. So a new trial date still has not been set as of the time of this recording. Now, Judge John Judge has ordered a hearing to take place on October 26th, and at this hearing, the defense motion is going to be heard regarding dismissing the grand jury indictment. What do you think he will decide? What surprised you the most about today's video? I cannot wait to read your comments. I cannot wait. Please leave me a comment in the comment section below. And thank you so much for watching. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye. Subscribe and let me know what you think in the comment section below.